We're good.
Okay, thank you.
All right, good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's Upper Rio Grande Flood Planning Group meeting. For the record, it is 9:03 a.m. when we started. I'd like to start by recognizing any guests, people that were not identified as part of quorum. Did we miss anybody?
I know that Alderman Cantu is joining us from San Elizario. I don't know if there's anyone else from the public that would want to announce themselves.
Good morning. This is Apurva Bora from IBWC, non-voting member.
Thank you.
Good morning, Dr. Bora.
Good morning.
Good morning. This is John Gwynn from Doña Ana County, New Mexico. Just guest today.
Thank you.
Good morning, sir.
Interesting.
Anybody else? All right, I'd also like to give the opportunity for people to make public comments at this time. Anybody want to address this group? Hearing none, I'd like to move on to item number 3, member updates. Anybody have anything to share at this point? Hearing none, I do like to share something. I want to give a shout out and thanks to AECOM, a team with the Rio Grande Council of Governments, AECOM, myself. We helped Hudspeth County submit an application to Tony Gonzalez's earmarks funding request program. And so I'm not sure if Joanna is here today with us.
I don't think Ms. McKenzie's here.
Okay, anyway, when last time I talked to her, she wanted to extend the thanks to the full group. I did give credit to this group as a form of technical assistance. One of the things that I recommended was, if we as members, if you have the time and the will to do so, we can offer our expertise to these small communities that don't necessarily have the internal capacity to even just consider projects or even apply for funding. I think we as a planning group are in a good position to help them out. Obviously, we're not going to do all the work for them. They still have to hire their engineers and do their due diligence. But very often we can take projects that are on hold or stencil and give them a slight push and get them to where they need to be and give them that momentum they need. So I'd like to offer up, if anybody's interested in offering your time and expertise to these small communities, please let me know. Please let Annette know. We have just started with Hudspeth County, but this is something we can do all throughout, especially communities like San Elizario. I think are one of the communities that I like to target next.
I'd be happy to offer help to see.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, and thank you again to AECOM team. I know that this was a last minute request, and so thank you for putting that information together, and let's be hopeful that there'll be some funding coming their way. So thanks for that.
Thank you. Anything else? Anybody else want to share anything before we get started?
Yeah, sorry, I can make the TWD update now if that works for everyone.
Okay.
Yeah. Great, thank you. So TWDB staff provided informal comments on the January tech memo deliverables last week, or perhaps you received it this week. Informal comments for the March 7th deliverables will be provided in May, so we're still on track for that. This is a reminder to please submit your executed contract or subcontract amendment to your TWD rep whenever that's executed. And a heads up that we've scheduled out some conference calls for May. The first is a tech consultant conference call for Tuesday, May 24th, and there's a chair's conference call on Wednesday, May 25th. And finally, we recently sent out both a newsletter, which included information on the required 60-day public comment period for the draft plan, as well as an email blast with additional guidance on FMX voting. So reach out if you have any questions on that. And that's it for me. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. Item number 4 then. Annette, all yours.
Yes, asking for approval on the minutes from the meeting that was held on March 15th. There is a correction that has already been noted. I do need to recognize that Dr. Shang was present at the meeting. He's being listed as absent on the roster, so that will be corrected on the minutes. Are there any other items that anyone else reviewed that you would like for any corrections to be made?
And everyone looks at.
Motion to accept with correction.
Okay.
Second.
Okay, first from Dave, second from Jeff. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, please indicate so by saying aye.
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 Anybody opposed? Okay, motion passes. Thank you. Item number 5, general RFP updates.
And I'll let you all take over the controls.
Thank you, Omar. Thank you, Annette. Gilbert Onduko with AECOM. All right, we got it up here. This is our 10th general meeting, and we're here to give you an update on the status of how we're progressing here with the project. So today we'll be just covering general RFP updates. So we've got summary of recent stakeholder meetings. We're also going to cover the status of evaluations of FMEs, FMSs, and FMPs, as well as having a discussion of recommended FMEs, FMPs, and FMSs. And at the end, we're also going to have an action to vote on the revised FMEs and FMSs, as well as having recommended FMPs. With that being said, I'll go ahead and turn it over. And I apologize. The team here that's going to be presenting is we've got Brian Blaisdell and Chris Wright, as well as having Jeff Irvin and Alejandra Marco on the call. So with that being said, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Brian. Go ahead, Brian.
Thanks, Gilbert. Morning, everyone. As Gilbert mentioned, I'll be sharing a brief schedule update on our various tasks and upcoming deliverables for the RFP. Over the next several weeks, we'll be finalizing our draft for Chapter 1, and we'll be submitting that to the RFPG for draft review once that's ready. We're also targeting to complete Chapters 2 and 3 by the end of May, which are the flood risk identification chapter and the floodplain management practices and goals. Sometime around June timeframe, we're aiming to complete the draft for Chapter 4 and 5. Well, actually, Chapter 4 will be a compilation of a summary of tasks 4 and 5, the identification and recommendation of FMEs, FMSs, and FMPs. So that will be in June. And then our ultimate goal for all the chapters to deliver draft to the RFPG is July 1st. That will provide about a month of review by the RFPG before our draft RFP is ultimately due to the Water Development Board by August 1st. So July 1st is our timeline for all of the chapters. In June, we are scheduling a wrap-up public meeting in El Paso to kind of share some of our findings and some of the RPG's discussions with the public related to FMEs, FMSs, and FMPs throughout the region. And once the draft RFP is submitted to the Water Development Board, there will be a 30-day public posting requirement before we have our public hearing. So we're aiming to have that sometime in September, 30 days after it's submitted or posted publicly for public review. And then once that public hearing is completed, the fall will be fall time frame, and winter will be incorporating any public input and addressing final comments at that time. So our final RP will be completed by January 2023. And actually, so wanted to see, is Barracuda on the line? I didn't have a chance to check.
Yes, I'm here representing Patricia Garcia. My colleague will join us a little later.
Awesome, thank you. Just wanted to see if we had a date scheduled for the El Paso wrap-up meeting, what location that might be.
Yes. So the note that she provided me was that she's looking to get the EPISD central office pre-function and lobby area. She requested the facility on June 8th, with June 9th as the alternative date. She let me know that EPISD met on Wednesday to make sure there was not a conflict on either of those dates, but they have not yet let us know, and we will let you all know as soon as they do if that requested day will work. And oh, she says here, we will let Annette and Chris know by end of day today.
Thanks, Mason.
Of course.
So we're currently planning for that meeting. It sounds like June 8th or June 9th might work for us. So I guess the next slide, we'll talk a little bit more about the upcoming RFPG meetings.
Hey, Brian. Brian,
Sorry?
just a question.
Yes.
At one of the previous meetings, I brought up a thought about a public meeting somewhere else also, other than just El Paso, for the wrap up. And Mason, since you're on the call and you could pass it on if you don't have information on it, but maybe there's some mechanism to get with commissioners, in some other community somewhere, or local commissioners some way to do a meeting, to show our good faith to the eastern part of our region. I mean, other than El Paso. So I just want to bring that up and see if it might be a consideration. I don't know if it's budget constrained or whether it might be a thought, but you remember we did a session in Presidio and Odessa earlier, and I don't think both of them are necessary, but maybe one to show good faith to the east. Make sure people back there have an opportunity to hear what's going on again.
Right.
As a wrap up.
Yeah, thanks, Dave. Oh, go ahead,
I can
Chris.
help respond to that. I was going to get into some slides right after Brian finished up that kind of talk about how we responded to your comment about that from the last meeting. And we actually had, I was going to go over some of the stakeholder coordination meetings that have happened since the last meeting. And one of them was with the city of Kermit, where Annette attended in person, and AECOM was there virtually to share with them some of our maps of their city and to get their feedback, whether they agreed that they had flooding issues or not, and if they knew of any solutions. And they did confirm that yes, they did have some standing water issues, and they sent us a contact of their consultants at Park Hill Smith Cooper. So we followed up with a call with them, and I'll get into some of the details about what was said on that call and what we can expect to come from that. But it was a very productive meeting. I don't know if Annette has anything to add, but we also have two more similar meetings scheduled at the city of Alpine and Sonora as well. And then also Annette presented at these two regional planning commission, the Permian Basin Regional Planning Commission and the Contra Valley Council of Governments on these dates, the 13th of April. So I don't know, Annette, do you have anything to follow up on or anything to add?
Yeah, well, I do think the Kermit meeting was fruitful. We were able to get that information from them that I don't think we would have gotten otherwise. When I did present and for Permian Basin and Contra Valley, the conversation was limited. I know that they had a lot of other agenda items to attend to. So with Contra Valley, they for sure gave feedback about meeting with the city of Sonora and getting with the city manager. So I'll utilize their staff to ensure that we've got that meeting set up with them. But in Permian Basin, there wasn't really, there wasn't any discussion at all or any questions that were asked of me. So I think that what we'll probably end up doing in that situation is if we have any other communities similar to Kermit, I'll just make the cold call and see if we can set a meeting with them, if we can meet with them virtually. And I think that can kind of help us get things going. But I think that it was helpful in any situation that we were able to go about it this way. And I think we're going to have more attention now. So in terms of the public meeting, I don't know if I don't know, Dave, if that would be, I think, as meaningful as compared to doing these kinds of meetings.
Oh, I agree.
Yeah, so.
I appreciate Chris's update. That's good information. Okay.
I didn't know you guys were doing that. So that's
We
Yeah,
did.
awesome.
Yeah, it's wonderful. Good job, Chris.
No, it's definitely a team effort, and thank you, Annette, for getting out there and being there in person. I know that adds a lot to those meetings, having someone in person. So.
Yeah, thank you. All right, so in terms of upcoming RFPG meetings, we are planning to have two remaining before our submittal of the draft RFP to the development board. So our next one is tentatively scheduled for end of May. That's actually going to be the meeting. We were contacted by the Water Development Board indicating that I believe Reem and James from the Development Board were interested in attending one of our RFPG meetings. They're making an effort to visit all of the planning groups throughout the state over the course of the planning cycle. And so we recommended this next May meeting as that meeting for them to attend. And I believe that we discussed that with Ned. I don't know if you have any updates on that, or is that still the case? Yeah, so I think that's still the plan.
Was that, I'm so sorry, we were on mute.
Oh, yeah, I was just wondering if we confirmed that date with the development board for Reem and James to attend, or.
Yes, let me, I believe, as we're having this meeting, I'll go back to the doodle poll to make sure that I have the right date. I don't want to say it right now, so if you can come back to me, I'll have that ready for you.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I believe we've sent out doodle polls to the planning group for the various upcoming meetings. The next one after that will likely be in mid-July timeframe, and that will be our meeting to approve any remaining FMEs, FMSs, and FMPs for the draft, and then also, of course, approve the submittal of the draft RFP to the development board before we submit. Then our meeting in October will be focused on discussing the outcome of the public hearing, consolidating and responding to comments, and just sort of addressing any wrap-up items for that RFP. And then December, we don't really have an agenda planned, but I imagine it'll be more of the same, just kind of wrapping things up, addressing comments, and making revisions. So that's our roadmap ahead. And I guess for the next slides, Chris will be covering some task updates.
All right, thanks, Brian. So yeah, first I was going to just go over some of the stakeholder coordination meetings that we've had since the last general RFPG meeting about a month ago. We've been really pushing pretty hard to get the meetings that need to take place coordinated, and also to try to receive any information, any models, any data that we need for these evaluations. So there's been a lot of coordination going on, and I'll just give a brief overview. I won't go into too much detail on all these, but there's a Rio Grande / Bravo basin flows meetings that happen on a bi-weekly basis, I believe. It kind of varies, but we had one on March 23rd. This was a group that Jeff Bennett invited us to join early on in the regional flood planning process, and so we've been attending these regularly. There was one yesterday as well, where we discussed that we did have some strategies related to some of their goals, which mainly revolve around environmental flows in the Rio Grande Basin. And I shared with them those strategies and evaluations, and we're hoping to get some feedback on whether they have any edits to those, or if they have costs that they could help us come up with for achieving those evaluations and strategies. So we're hoping to get some feedback from them that we can incorporate into the cost. USIBWC, we had a big meeting scheduled with them and El Paso County, Doña Ana County, and EP Water, EPCWID on the levee certification, as well as on sedimentation and vegetation growth in the Rio Grande, and some of the strategies we had related to that. And so this was just a prep meeting for that. We just wanted to make sure that they were aware of what we were going to talk about. And we thought that was pretty helpful because we were going to have 2 meetings. We decided to narrow it down to 1 meeting, and we took care of the rest through email. So City of Kermit, we already talked about, and I'll get into a little bit more about what came out of that meeting in some later slides here. EP Water, again, this was sort of a prep meeting for the one that we had with USIBWC and Doña Ana County and all the other stakeholders. We wanted to make sure that they were just aware of what we were going to be talking about. Similarly with EPCWID1, we had a couple meetings in preparation, and we also were trying to flesh out some of the details and get some early feedback from them about how much they thought some of the studies or costs related to their problem areas and their issues might cost, since we are going to have to include those costs in the plan. We had a meeting with Hudspeth County where Gilbert Saldana from El Paso County joined us, and Joanna was there from Hudspeth County. We talked about mainly their issues related to illegal developments that are happening in Hudspeth, their rapid growth that they are experiencing, in the staff that they have to manage the permitting and record keeping and deed related items for new developments. That's been a real struggle for them, and so we do have an FMP, a non-structural flood mitigation project that is for Hudspeth County in that regard. And so we were trying to get some feedback from El Paso County to help us cost out what that might take to get a program up and going and sort of establish a process to deal with those new developments. And so we just want to thank Gilbert Saldana again for joining us on that call. It was very helpful. We also had, this is that meeting I was mentioning earlier that we were prepping for, was
Just real quick.
a coordination. Yes.
Sorry to stop you. I want to reiterate and give thanks to Gilbert and to the ACOM team. You guys are going way overboard on your customer service. You guys are really providing a lot of high quality work for Joanna and Hudspeth County. She's super excited over the work that you guys are doing. And so again, I want to extend my thanks to both parties. Thank you.
Thanks, Omar.
Appreciate that. So yeah, this meeting again, this was a big meeting that was up and coming. It's been sort of in the works for a while, because one of our main goals and a big strategy for us is to deal with levee certification in El Paso. We know it's a very hot topic, and there's a lot of strong feelings about it. And so this was, I thought, a very productive meeting where, and we'll get into a little bit more of the details, but mainly focused around prioritizing which segments of levees to try to get certified by FEMA first, and then also to deal with how to tackle some of the tough issues related to sedimentation and vegetation maintenance in the Rio Grande, and how that affects the flood capacity in the Rio Grande. And so, like I said, I'll give a little bit more details on that later on. The Permian Basin Regional Planning Commission and the Concho Valley Council of Governments, we already discussed that, but Annette was there in person. We helped her prepare a presentation to give, and she, like I said, these are the counties that were represented by each of those councils or commissions. And these are the ones that are in our region. There are other counties represented as well. So this was part of our effort to get the word out and let them know here's our strategies, our studies, our projects that we're coming up with. If you want to give us feedback, now is the time. And so we think that was really helpful to get it out in the rest of the region, you know, since we have so much going on in El Paso County, and the rest of the region is very isolated. A lot of these small towns may not be aware of it. So we think that was very helpful. And thanks again for Annette for going out there and doing that. And then lastly, I'll mention Texas State Soil and Water Conservation Board. I know Ben Wilde is here today. He joined our last meeting as well and followed up with me on a call after that meeting to just kind of clarify a few things about what we are planning related to some of the NRCS dams. And we'll talk a little bit more about that today. But I know that Jeff Irvin also followed up with the Texas State Soil and Water Conservation Board on April 13th to talk about what we were proposing in that earmark for Hudspeth County, which was related to some NRCS dams. And then we already discussed these, but it sounds like we're kind of zeroing in on a date, Annette. So we haven't actually set a date yet, but we're still targeting this week of May 9th through 13th for these 2 additional stakeholder meetings. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct. And Jeff Bennett, I don't know if you're still on the line with us, but if Jeff is on the call, I would like some assistance from him where we can get this coordinated. I think with Alpine, we can have a larger meeting and we can invite the public. But I think with Sonora, it's going to be more beneficial to have that meeting similar to what we did with Kermit, to have the meeting with staff.
I'm here, and I suggest reaching out to Adelina Bell at the City of Alpine.
Okay, I will do that. Thank you.
I can help coordinate that if you like. I can send you both an email.
Okay, I do have Adelina's email, so I'll CC you on it, Jeff, just to let her know what we're starting.
No, it wasn't that time.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
All right. So unless there's any questions about the stakeholder meetings, we'll jump right into some of the details here. I apologize. There's going to be a lot of words on some of these slides, but we're basically trying to refine and flesh out the details of some of these FMEs, FMSs, and FMPs. Again, for some of y'all that this might be your first time joining the call, a FME is a flood management evaluation. It's basically a study that we are proposing, and if we propose it or if we recommend it in the regional flood plan, then if grant funding becomes available through the state, through a state-funded grant program in the future, and there's a need to develop alternatives or do a feasibility type of study, then it will be a requirement that that study is included in this regional flood plan. And so that's what these are all about. Alternatively, if a study has already been done, which studied the details of the maybe developed floodplain models and detailed mapping, and they've already established what the alternatives are and what alternative is recommended in the previous feasibility study, then it could be included in our plan as a flood mitigation project, or FMP. And if it's in our plan as a flood mitigation project and a future grant program comes out that's state funded, then it will be a requirement that in order for funding of construction of that project, it would need to be in this plan as a FMP. So those are the 2 primary categories. And the third category is a flood management strategy, or an FMS. And that's sort of a catch-all for all things that don't fall in those other 2 categories. So if something might involve ongoing or recurring costs, like maintenance programs, or some regulatory assistance, perhaps related to developments, that would fall into the strategy category. And so it's sort of a catch-all, but those are the 3 main groups that we're trying to develop as part of this plan. And again, it's related to going to be a requirement if an entity tries to apply for funding in future grant programs. So these are some of the details. We're just, like I said, trying to refine these. I won't, read all these out too much, but I do want to make sure that you all are just familiar with them as we're refining them. And, I've highlighted in orange anything that is going to be brought up for a vote at the end. I've consolidated what these changes are to the FMEs, FMSs and FMPs, and at the end we'll vote on, generally if we're in agreement with these changes or not objecting to them. But eventually, the full list of the final strategies and studies and projects will be provided with our draft deliverable. So you'll have another opportunity to approve these all at once in a big list. But I'm kind of going through these one by one, just so that, when you see them in the plan, it sounds a little bit familiar. You recall some of the discussion, and you've had the opportunity to comment on it or bring up any questions you might have during this meeting. So please feel free to interrupt. I'll try to get through these in the time that we have. I think we can make it through there, but if it starts seeming like we have a lot of discussion on some of them, I'll let you know we're getting close to our 2-hour mark, but hopefully we'll get through it all. So this first one was related to that earmark that Omar brought up earlier for Hudspeth County for federal funding. We had a Colonia study that mentioned the need for doing detailed modeling and putting together a stormwater master plan for the Colonia-wide system at Fort Hancock. And so we did come up with a cost of $100,000 for that. I think that was higher than what was in the Colonia study. We bumped it up a little bit based on our judgment, and that's what we included in the earmark for the Hudspeth County, which they submitted last week. And so it's possible that could get funded earlier and may not need to be in the plan, but right now it is a FME that we submitted in our tech memo, and this is the FME right here. And I was just going to point out we had a duplicate FME that was pretty much the same thing, saying develop solution for flooding near Fort Hancock, because that came out of our discussion where we had a workshop with all the stakeholders, and this was an additional FME, and we just kind of stuck it in there, but we've tried to remove all the duplicates, but I kind of caught this one a little bit late, but we're going to go ahead and delete that one since we already have one in our plan for that. So that's one of the changes to the FMEs we've already discussed. There is more information. One of the things we talked about also in that same workshop where we came up with some of these FMEs and FMSs was that there are some issues in Sierrablanca. And I don't know, is Joanna on the call from Hudspeth County? Is she with us here today?
I am. I'm here.
Hey, Joanna. So we were kind of vague in our description on what's needed for Sierrablanca for the FME. We just had developed solutions for flooding near Sierrablanca, and so I went back and I rewatched the video that we had from that workshop, and you had mentioned, and I looked at our notes, and our notes were saying that bridge is completely washed out during some flood event in Sierrablanca, and some folks were trapped. Maybe even it sounded like it was your neighborhood that may have been trapped for 5 days or so. Is that right? But we're just trying to get a little bit more information about some of the issues in Sierrablanca, just so we can come up with a cost or see if it's still a good fit for our plan. It looked like the population of Sierrablanca is about 700 people, so it's a pretty small community. I guess is it considered a colonia?
It
but
is.
I just thought,
It is.
yeah. Okay, and so I didn't know if you had anything else to share, or you could follow up with an email as well. But like which which road you were talking about was flooded, where people were trapped, and if there's any other details, if you could reach out this week. I know this week's almost over, but we're really trying to get, or early next week would be fine too. But if you could just provide some additional details, and you're welcome to bring them up now if you want, but I didn't want to put you on the spot. So just wanted to let you know we'd like to seek some more information about the issues you're having there.
I will, where can I send the email, and I will send that along.
I'll go ahead and you can send it to me. Yeah, I think you have my email, but I'll shoot you a reminder after this just so you have it fresh.
I've got it, and I will send you those details.
Great, thank you. So again, this is related to the earmark that we helped put together for Hudspeth County, and this particular one, I won't read out the whole thing, but it's related to Camp Rice Arroyo Dam 1 and Alamo Arroyo Dam 3. As I mentioned, Jeff Irvin got in touch with the Texas State Soil Water Conservation Board and discussed what would be needed to get these dams upgraded or rehabilitated or studied. And the first step of that was to get it eligible for construction funds from NRCS PL 566 Watershed Rehabilitation Program. The upgrade of these two dams must be defined per federal NRCS requirements in a supplemental watershed plan. And so we thought the combined cost for that would be around $700,000. So that's what we put in the earmark. And Jeff, I don't know if you have anything else to add to this, or anything else you want to say about your conversation with TSS WCB or about these two dams.
No, it's just that there's a normal way to go through and get this money by making the proposal directly to the NRCS or through the state board, but it appears that we can also do it through the regional flood plan. So this just seemed a way to basically get state matching funds for the federal funds that would come down to do this work. You don't need matching funds for the stormwater for the supplemental watershed plan, but you do need matching funds for the construction. So the way this would work is it would go in as an FME in the current plan, and then when the supplemental watershed plan is done at 100% federal expense via the earmark or other path, then the state could support the county by coming up with the matching funds for the construction that's needed that comes out of the planning process.
All right, thank you, Jeff. And this is just a figure showing where those two dams are relative to the downstream census designated places and cities of Fort Hancock or Colonia communities, Fort Hancock and Kayla.
So you're not showing the figure.
Oh, I'm sorry. Whoops. Yeah, I guess it's going to be a screen sharing issue, but yeah, I'm not sure how to get it onto the screen at the moment, but I don't think that's really necessary to show. I was just going to kind of show it as a bonus, but thanks, Jeff. If there's anything else, feel free to interrupt, or any questions about that, let us know. But this is just a recap of the FME that we have related to the hydraulically inadequate dams. TCQ gave us a list of which dams are hydraulically inadequate. There was 27 of those in our region. So that was our initial FME. We've since then gone through and looked at these 27 and the downstream communities, and we've narrowed it down to 9, which we talked about in one of our previous general flood planning group meetings. And so these are the 9 that are NRCS dams that we want to refine this FME to just include these 9 dams, since they're the ones that seem to have the most risk from downstream communities. So this was another change to this FME number 13 in our region that we're proposing. We Also had some coordination meetings I mentioned with EPC WID1, where we were trying to get their input on what some of the costs might be for the FMEs that affected them the most and their problem issues. And so we did meet with Dr. Blair a couple times. He gave us some feedback of his first impressions on what he thought minimum costs might look like. So for the Lower Mesa drain, he was thinking somewhere around 300,000. Omar, I know Dr. Blair, he was on vacation. I think he's out of the country at the moment, but if you could maybe follow up with him when he gets back. He had mentioned that there was a cost, there might be an internal cost estimate that y'all have done for replacing the culverts along the Lower Mesa drain. And we think that would be helpful just to have if it's available when we're coming up with the cost. So I don't know if you could put that down as an action item to follow up with Dr. Blair and us when he gets back.
Yeah, and to give you some background on that, Dr. Blair, first of all, yes, he's on vacation, but he's still working. He's at that kind of...
I'm sorry to hear that.
I hope if there's ever anybody who needed a vacation, it was him.
Right, and even then. And then regarding that cost estimate, we produced one a couple of years back when Hurricane Harvey, there was some federal and state investment, some extra dollars that the flood hazard mitigation program ended up receiving. We tried submitting an application. We were not successful, but we produced a full-blown application, severely lacking on the benefit cost analyses, but still, I remember we did include costing for what it would take to replace every culvert in both the Mesa drain and Mesa spur drain. And it would include things like the culvert, price of the culvert, replacing the roads. We went and evaluated every crossing. Again, just by being there, giving it a rough estimate on what size the current culvert is and whether we could recycle it. And the ultimate decision was no, none of those can really be recycled. Can be kept. We need to upgrade all of them. We tabulated which, for example, were free-spanning bridges, and therefore this wouldn't be a problem for those. So we did some site work and then some costing work, replacing the road, worked with El Paso County to quantify an estimated amount. I can't recall the exact numbers. And then as part of our application, because we had to submit it through El Paso County, they were willing to provide a match on replacing the roads themselves once we replace the culvert. So there's some work. I remember we measured very rudimentary, both in GIS and then on site, the length of the crossing, which then gives us a lot of information on like the culvert size and things like that. So I have all of that. I will check in with Dr. Blair again to see if he wants to just send everything to you or how he wants to move forward. But yeah, we did do some work on this.
Great. Yeah, that sounds very helpful. I wasn't, I know that he had mentioned that you all had done some internal cost estimating, but I didn't realize it was a full application. So yeah, please share that if you can, once you get a hold of Dr. Blair, but that would be very useful to us. And it sounds like you all did a lot of the legwork of figuring out what needs to be replaced. So, that's helpful to know. We wouldn't really need to include that extra additional work in our cost estimate for this evaluation. We would focus mainly probably on the hydraulic modeling of Mesa Drain and making sure that is in place. And then we could just build off of the information you all already provided. So yeah, please do send that when you get a chance. Thanks for that information. Some other projects we discussed with EPC WID number 1 was an arroyo siphon that is needed at SH20 near Tornillo. And there's a new arroyo that's formed there that is overtopping SH20. Floodwaters are overtopping in sediment, and they flood out cropland that's downstream, as well as one of the irrigation canals. And so it's an issue that needs to be resolved, and it's going to take coordination with TxDOT, since SH20 is a TxDOT road. And there was an SH20 feasibility study that was provided by TxDOT, but it seemed to stop short of Tornillo. And we checked it to see if maybe they mentioned this issue in there, but it didn't seem to extend past Tornillo all the way to this location. So Dr. Blair did mention that about 25,000 to 50,000, minimum would probably be needed for this study. But I think the main obstacle or main challenge, I should say, with this will just be making sure that coordination with TxDOT occurs, since that's probably going to take a sediment basin. So that's one of the changes that we're suggesting to our description. We talked in our original description here in black and white, or gray and white, showing to just install siphon at SH20. But after this conversation with Dr. Blair, it became clear that we actually need more than that. We probably need a detention basin to trap some of that sediment. And so we just added a little bit more detail to that FME, and that's what we're proposing to change it to, rather than just mention the siphon. So that's the plan there. The city of Kermit, as we mentioned, we had a very productive call with them. They did confirm some issues. We then had a flooding issues, that is. We then had a follow-up call with their consultants at Park Hill Smith and Cooper in Lubbock. And that also was a very productive call. We found out that they have considered to develop a city park on the west side. Apparently they have some playa flooding issues in that area. And there is a location that they identified that they think it would be useful to have a park that also serves as sort of a retention pond. And that could take some of the water that floods other parts of the cities out of the system. And so we are still, we sort of drafted this plan as an FME. If it's a fleshed out study and they've already done some modeling that they can provide us in very soon time frame, then it's possible we could still consider it as a FMP. But at this time, it's looking, it sounds like it's more of an idea or a concept that hasn't really been studied yet. So we're proposing a potential new FME, and this would be the language that we would include: develop a citywide drainage study and stormwater master plan for City of Kermit, develop detailed H&H models for City of Kermit to evaluate areas with highest flood risk, include concept designs for flood improvement alternatives considering a park detention pond on the west side of the city, as well as reconstructing streets with curb and gutter. So that's hopefully what will come out of this, but we are still waiting. We kind of poked them again this week to try to provide that information. There was a plan that has a citywide drainage study. I'm sorry, not a citywide drainage study, but a sort of development plan that he said that they could provide to us, which would be helpful as well in defining this. So that's sort of pending until we get that information. But we thought it was a great call, and we're glad we followed up with them. We've also been meeting with this is sort of how we came to pick the cities of Kermit, Sonora, and Alpine. Is this master list here, which we provided in previous regional floodplain group meetings, where we kind of looked at what are the top cities in our region outside of El Paso County, where they are severely lacking updated FEMA floodplain maps, and they appear to have a high number of buildings at risk based on the Fathom floodplain information that we have, which is the best available information for everything outside of El Paso County, which has had a recent preliminary FEMA study. So we've gone through a few iterations of this list where we've refined, we've got more detailed floodplains from Fathom. So this is our most up-to-date list of number of buildings in the 100-year floodplain or 1% annual chance floodplain. And so we've highlighted in blue the cities that are outside of El Paso County, and in orange we've got census designated places. And so we've put an X here next to the ones that we thought were the highest risk and the highest priority. And again, we didn't put an X if they were in El Paso County or if they already have a separate FMP that we're considering for those particular locations. So we're proposing a new FME to address these cities. And right now it's very similar to the one we just went over for Kermit, but it's developed citywide drainage study and stormwater master plan for at-risk cities and census designated places with outdated or missing FEMA floodplain maps. A little typo there, I'll correct. And develop detailed H&H models of drainage in communities to evaluate areas with highest flood risk, include concept designs and cost estimates for flood improvement alternatives, include these cities, and we list them out there. The ones again that have these X's here. Now, some of these could change. You know, if we end up not having a separate FMP for Presidio, you know, maybe we'll add that one to the list. We're going to talk a little bit more about Presidio here in some later slides, but just wanted to throw this out there as a potential new FME. Does anybody have any questions or comments about that? Thoughts? All right. Yeah, so this basically covers the FME on this next slide that's related to development to USIBWC maintenance of the Rio Grande floodway. We have this FME number one. This is develop and implement a sedimentation vegetation control program in the Rio Grande. And that includes assessing the capacity with updated hydrology and sediment and vegetation conditions. We understand there is a study going on right now that USIBWC expects to have completed in draft form by August. And that will have some updated hydrologic and hydraulic modeling for the Rio Grande. So that's kind of part of this. The other part of this is assessing the risk related to capacity in the Rio Grande floodway between the two levees on the American and Mexico side when excessive sediment or vegetation growth are not controlled in there. That would increase the risk of those levees overtopping in large populated areas. So that's why this is an FME that we have, and we just want to continue coordination with USIBWC on this topic. There was a study that came out in 2020 that we reviewed during our meeting with them, and we just wanted to have this meeting with USIBWC on the 7th of April to make sure they were aware of, you know, what we're planning on proposing in the plan related to the maintenance for sediment and vegetation. So this kind of lists out the bullets that we went over in that meeting. Which I mentioned, you know, EPC WID number one, EP Water, Doña Ana County, El Paso County, we're all part of that meeting as well. So I won't read through all this, but that's sort of the general overview of what we talked about. And we'll provide these slides. You all will have, or they're in the meeting material. So if you want to go through these in detail, you can, and feel free to reach out with any questions. But we did request some feedback from USIBWC concerning the potential to apply outside funding from the state of Texas or a local jurisdiction to provide the means to accelerate the schedule of high riverine flood risk. So basically that's a question to IBWC about, you know, if this was considered a high risk in the plan, a high priority, and we know that their funding mechanisms go through the federal government, and they have to go through a very strict process of getting funding. And we just want to understand, is there a way that state-funded grant programs could help, you know, contribute to that, to accelerate certain goals or objectives that we have established in this regional flood planning group. So we drafted an email. We were going to have a whole separate meeting about this, but it's a very sensitive topic. And so we thought it would be better to handle that as just an email. So we drafted our question related to that state funding and the possibilities. And we sent that to IBWC, so we're waiting a response on that. Dr. Bora, any comments or any questions about that meeting we had, or about our request for feedback?
Yes, Chris, good morning. So our legal department is actually going through it. And as a federal entity, we cannot lobby for actually funding for our project, as well as we cannot get actually funding from other sources other than just whatever approved by the Congress.
Right.
But you get a response from our legal department here very soon.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Hey, Chris, I know we still got a lot of information when we're an hour into it. Do we want to maybe take a little break, give somebody a chance to get up, stretch, and because we still got a lot of ways to go. What does everybody think?
Yeah,
Yes.
we're about maybe halfway through the slides at this point. So I think, we could take a 5-minute break if everybody wants to, and just give everyone a chance to regroup at maybe
10:05.
10:05 El Paso time.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Gilbert. Hey, everyone, could you hear me?
Yes, so Omar stepped out. He's going to give public comment at the El Paso Commissioners Court, but we still have a quorum. So if you would like to go ahead and continue, Jeff, Chris, I think that's fine.
Okay.
I'm gonna have to step out around 10:30, and then I'll connect through my phone. But it'll be like a quick disconnect.
Okay, yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
All right. So, yeah, just as I mentioned, this is the FME that we talked about with USI BWC. We also had a separate FME that is related to also the Rio Grande capacity. However, it's more focused on pump station capacity, and we had included a note in after our workshop with the different stakeholders that we would tie this one into FME 1, which is the one we were just discussing about sedimentation and vegetation. But it basically says that we would conduct a flood risk assessment at City of El Paso locations where drainage is controlled by river stage and there's significant flood risks on non-river side of the levee. I thought that this might be better as its own FME rather than trying to tie even more into this to this previous FME number 1, since there's already kind of a lot of important aspects just to throw in the pump station capacities in those different scenarios. It seems like this is probably enough to have its own separate FME. So I was proposing to, take out that language about tying it into FME 1 and just make it its own flood risk assessment. So I don't know, Jeff, Jeff Irvin, if you have any issues with that, or if anybody, on the planning group or public, has an issue keeping these as 2 separate rather than combining them into 1. That's what we're proposing here.
I don't have any issue.
All right. This next one, again, it's kind of refinement, and I apologize. I know some of this is kind of the details, but we just, we're going to be going through this for these, over the next month or so, as we're finalizing our evaluations. And so I just thought I'd share it with you, the process that's taking place, and give, you all the opportunity to see these one more time before you see the full list. Maybe the full list won't be as overwhelming, but I realize this is kind of a nitty-gritty detail, but we had 3 separate FMEs for prioritizing arroyos in City of El Paso County, and Hudspeth County. I think that they could probably be combined into 1 FME. And so that's what I'm proposing here. And just saying City of El Paso, and Hudspeth as 1 study. Does anyone have any issues with that? Or Jeff, I know, again, you're the one that kind of put them as 3 separate ones, but I think it makes sense to combine them as 1 unless there are any objections. All right.
Are we going to lose any prioritization to Hudspeth if we combine these?
Well, we can still keep the prioritization separate. We could prioritize them for Hudspeth, prioritize them for El Paso County, and for the city. We don't have to combine all 3, but just the study itself, I think it makes sense to combine them.
I think in this day of GIS, it's just more efficient to take a slew of watersheds at once rather than have separate studies on each watershed.
I agree with the combination. I just want to make sure we don't reduce the support for Hudspeth based on more support for El Paso or city, county or city. It's okay.
Right. Yeah. No, I think that we would probably be applying the same principles and methods to prioritize them. So that's really the main purpose for combining them into 1, just to be more efficient. But the way that we prioritize them, this isn't really dictating, that we're going to prioritize them over those 3 areas. We can still prioritize them separately. Just thought we'd combine it into 1.
I think we'll take that comment into consideration when we write up the scope of work for this. We aren't actually doing this study, we're just scoping it. So when we
Yeah.
scope it, we'll be careful to basically address what you just said.
Right.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that people understand that we're focusing on the entire area.
Yep, that's good feedback. Thanks, Dave.
Okay. All right.
So we have an FMP that is related to this project, Fort Bliss Sump with EP Water. It was conceptualized several years ago. I want to say maybe 2013. Correct me if I'm wrong, Isela, but it was sort of put on hold because there was potential wetland delineation that needed to happen by the U.S. Army. And when we were coordinating with them as part of this regional flood plan, the U.S. Army said, "Oh, by the way, that wetland delineation was completed recently, and we can share that report with you." And we actually did get that report recently. Isela, did you see that? I sent you that. Okay, great. And so I just, as I said, we're kind of going through and refining these. I noticed that we have this as an FME still, and we also have it as an FMP. And so we obviously we can't have it be both. TWDB has expressed that you can't duplicate the same project as both an FME and an FMP. However, we are still waiting on the modeling associated with this project. So if we can receive the modeling, then we could potentially still include it as an FMP. If we don't receive it within the next 1 or 2 weeks, it might need to stay as an FME, which would again mean that you could only get funding through state grant programs to come up with alternatives and recommend those alternatives in a feasibility study, rather than if it was included as an FMP, you could get funding to actually construct and build, design and construct the project with final design in plans. So we did have a meeting with EP Water's consultant that did that feasibility study very recently, actually 2 days ago, and that was MCI, and they did provide us that feasibility study, so that was very helpful. However, we are still waiting on the modeling and backup data that we would need to include it as an FMP. So depending on when we get that is going to kind of dictate whether this stays as an FME or an FMP. But just wanted to give a quick update on that.
I'll go ahead and follow up with MCI so they can send that to you ASAP. Okay,
thank you. And yeah,
Thank you.
Mark Medina from MCI was very helpful, and yeah, it sounds like he's on it. It's just it might take a little bit of time, but yeah, any sort of push we can get at this point is helpful. So we also met with one of our sub-consultants, View. They specialize in early warning systems, and that is one of our goals and one of our FMEs that we came up with, is to develop and improve an early warning system throughout the region. We wanted to sort of narrow that focus. It's such a large region and there's so many areas that are so remote that we went back to this this list that we talked about earlier of the most buildings that are impacted by the fathom floodplains that we have, and mainly with a focus outside of El Paso. But for this early warning system, we wanted to include the whole region, which includes El Paso, the most populated area, and the most buildings in the floodplains. So when we were talking with View, they thought it'd be helpful to see what data are available, where are the biggest risks, and what makes the most sense as far as developing early warning systems, which cities to focus on. So the ones that we have an X next to here are the ones that we narrowed it down to, and that was El Paso City, Socorro City, Pecos City, Fort Bliss, which is a census designated place, Canutillo, also within El Paso County, Presidio, City of Presidio, City of San Rosario, Marfa, and Fort Stockton. And so they did a evaluation of the radar data that's available in those areas, the nearby gauges, both rainfall and stream gauges, and they put together a comprehensive plan recommendation, what it would take to develop an early warning system in those locations. And they are going to be providing us a scope and fee for what a study like that or what a program like that might take to get up and running and maintained. You know, the first conversation with them, it sounds like it's going to be pretty expensive. So it is something that you would need to apply for grant. A lot of these small communities would have to apply for grant funding to be able to get this type of program for their area. Typically, they do this for more populated cities, so that will be a challenge. Is you know, figuring out if it makes sense to do that at this approach. But they will have a couple different options that are less expensive, both to set up and to maintain. But you know, some of these services they're talking about have monthly maintenance fees in the range of, you know, $10,000 or $12,000, and we realize that that might not be sustainable for a lot of these communities. So that's why there will be some options presented, but you know, they're very good at what they do, and so that's why we got them on our team. And so they're helping us put together the fee amount that we're going to propose for this particular FME.
Chris, there was a question from Jeff. I'm not sure if it's an old one, but he had his hand raised.
He sort of answered it. I'm fine. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you. Yeah, sorry, I'm not paying attention to the hands on the screen. So if anyone's raising a hand, feel free to let me know. We also recently found out about a clean water stormwater revolving fund, or I think I got that acronym right, the SRF grant application for the yeah, I don't think it's stormwater revolving fund, but it is
it's a state
fund.
Yeah, the state Clean Water State Revolving Fund.
Yes, thank you. But we did recently find out about a strategy that was recommended in Presidio by the Presidio County Underground Water Conservation District, who we did meet when we were at our public meeting in Presidio. And these are the details of that project that they requested $500,000 to implement. We are just coordinating right now with the district and with Jeff Bennett. And I know Jeff was trying to reach out to, I think, some landowners to confirm, but we just, you know, we're considering adding this as an FME, but we do need to know exactly where this particular wetland is located. And yeah, it's called the La Junta de los Rios Restoration Wetlands Project. So if we can nail down in the next week or so, you know, exactly where that is, then this might be a potential new FME we could include in our plan. But like I said, that's kind of pending that last just detail on where exactly it's located. But yeah, just want to share that. Any updates, Jeff, on that coordination?
No, and just so everybody knows, you know, this was news to me. I know where La Junta is, and I know the landowner. So I will meet with that landowner and figure out what exactly this is about. But I don't have any details more than what you've provided. Okay, well, if you could, if you know where La Junta Wetlands is, like even if you're not sure exactly where this is, could you just maybe give us that general location? On the Texas side, upstream of the confluence with the Rio Conchos. Right, and that's for the general location we were given, but we really need to put it on a map. Is there something, sure, any way you could just like circle a map and send that to us in PDF? And that'd probably be, you know, mainly. I'd like to be sure that it's the same place. Let me just check with the landowner and be sure that. Okay. Because my understanding that does not catch floodwaters from anything other than the Rio Grande, which, that's below Fort Quitman. There's just not a lot of flood risk. So
Right.
I'm a little confused, and let me just clarify some things, and I'll do that as quickly as I can.
Thank you. Yeah, we don't mean to rush you too much. I know
And I understand.
We've been coordinating through email, and yeah, the reason why we're trying to look at it is kind of like you said, it may not pose a lot of flood mitigation benefits depending on where it's located, and so that'll help us assess whether it's appropriate to include in the plan. But that pretty much wraps up the FME updates. Don't worry, that was the longest section of updates. The FMSs and FMPs are a shorter presentation here, but we'll jump into the flood management strategies, which again is sort of a catch-all for anything that doesn't fall into the FME or FMP category. And it also includes recurring costs like associated with maintenance and that type of thing. Going back to the meeting that we had with USIBWC in El Paso County, Doña Ana County, EP Water, we talked about that vegetation sedimentation, but we also talked about FEMA levee accreditation. That's one of the goals that we had in our plan. And this was the FMS that we identified for getting all the levees through El Paso accredited. It's going to take a lot of coordination. We have been talking with EP Water about putting together a proposal for some of the levees that are ready to be accredited at this point in time. The only missing piece is interior drainage study in Doña Ana County, but there might be some workarounds to that, which we discussed in that meeting. It could involve doing an assessment of whether there's some hydraulically independent levee segments. FEMA would definitely need to weigh in on some of that information, that coordination. But we did request some feedback from IBWC after that meeting, which we thought would be helpful in prioritizing, other than those 3 segments that are on the Doña Ana County border that are ready to be certified, where you have sort of a separate scope and fee that we'd like to flesh out, prioritizing the remainder of the levees in the city and the county of El Paso that need to be certified. And so in order to help prioritize those and coordinate those prioritizations with both the city and the county, we think it'd be helpful to know what is the primary reason that the remainder of these levees are not certified. What is the approximate level of protection? Is it the 1% annual chance, or is it maybe they have the 1% annual chance level of protection, but they just don't have that required freeboard of 3 feet. So if we know that a certain segment has that 1% chance level of protection, but they just don't have that freeboard, that might not be as high of a priority as another segment that doesn't even have the 1% annual chance level of protection. So that's why we're asking these questions, and we're going to try to prioritize, which areas are most at risk based on this information. And the last question we asked USIBWC is, we know that we have a goal, which is on this page, which states that we'd like to increase flood protection of unaccredited levees to meet FEMA levee accreditation requirements, an updated flood mapping to account for any change in levee accreditation status. That's a short-term goal of 10 years. And we have it applicable to the entire RFPG. And since this goal was established, we have had some conversations with IBWC about that. And we realize, for example, the Presidio area, I think it's around the 20 to 25 year level of protection right now. But in order to increase that to the 100-year level of protection, that would involve some extensive coordination with the Mexico side, the Mexico component of USIBWC. And there are certain treaties and minutes, I believe is a term, that would need to be updated and coordinated. And that's just it seems like a lofty goal to try to get it for the whole region within a 10-year time frame. And so I just wanted to throw this out there. I know this is supposed to be more focused on FMEs, FMSs, FMPs, but are there any thoughts that anyone has about whether we should keep this goal as is and try to keep it to 10 years for the whole region versus some of our other goals are more long-term, like 30 years, and we could apply it to maybe just El Paso County, which is our most populated area at risk.
Back burner.
And it might be a little bit more feasible to accomplish that if we narrow it down to El Paso County rather than the whole region. And if we maybe extend it from 10 years to 30 years, we could apply both these changes, or we could just apply one of these changes. Just want to throw that out there and see if anybody had any thoughts related to that.
Chris, if I recall that, and our conversation on that was that we wanted to keep it at 10 years because we wanted to give it as much momentum as we could. We had back and forths on that. And then Dr. Bora, I believe, raised his hand.
Yes, please. Let's go,
yes.
Dr. Bora.
Yes, Chris. After that AECOM meeting with all the other stakeholders, so we are planning another meeting with FEMA Levy Voices group, and maybe end of May or in the middle of June, so that we can discuss levy independence issue. So no matter how IBWC certify those that levies are built according to FEMA standards and local sponsor completes all the interior drainage study, but they will still not actually do the accreditation because of those independent issues, because the both ends of those levee segments are actually, according to FEMA, it's not attached to the high ground. So how to resolve that? So we are planning a meeting, and we'll invite all the local actually stakeholders in this area. And this will be mainly regarding the levees around El Paso because it's the most populated area.
Great, thank you for that. And yeah, that was sort of the reason for the last sort of question that we had asked as a follow-up to that meeting, which was out of the levies that remain to be certified, some of them all have different reasons of what's keeping them from being certified. In those cases, next to the Doña Ana County, it's just lacking in interior drainage, but the levees are constructed according to FEMA standards. So we want to know about the other levee segments. What is the last levee segment within the county that the latest that it could potentially be constructed if it requires actual design and construction? We're trying to figure out if that's going to be feasible with our goal of within the 10-year time frame. So that's why we're asking that question. And it sounds like thank you, Omar, for your feedback about how you all landed on the 10 years versus 30 years, and that sounds like you all have we all have discussed it and still feel comfortable sticking with the 10 years just to put as much pressure as possible to get this very important goal accomplished. I just wanted to touch base again on whether we should apply it to the entire region or if it was meant to be more focused on El Paso County.
And I know that on the levy issue and the funding, the developers here in El Paso, there's a strong group that's talking to Congresswoman Escobar in her office to get them to look at this area more and hopefully direct more funding for those purposes. So it's being discussed that with local stakeholders, public stakeholders, developers, mostly development, and Congresswoman Escobar's office.
And that's with a focus on El Paso, the city and the county?
To my understanding, it's developers from El Paso that got together, and they've been talking to FEMA and they've been talking to Congresswoman Escobar's office.
Okay.
Chris, I'm okay if we leave the 10 year for El Paso County area And if you think it's appropriate to change the rest of the area to 30 years, that's fine. Because I think the primary focus of this FMS is probably for El Paso County.
That's a great suggestion, Dave. I hadn't thought about that. We could split this up into two different goals. One with a short term, 10 years, being just El Paso County, and then the separate being 30 years, which I think is much more realistic considering, the lower level of protection in other parts of the region for those levees right now, like Presidio, for example. So yeah, I think that's a great suggestion. Anybody have any objections to that approach?
Dr. Akaba's, Dr. Bora's got his hand up again.
And no, I am already done.
I'm sorry, what was that, Dr. Bora?
No,
this is only here. For Presidio, it is 25 years plus 4 feet of freeboard. Okay, there is a 4 feet of freeboard on top of the 25-year flow elevation.
Right. Thank you for that clarification. Yep. That's right. But I guess that would still fall short of like in El Paso County, where we're trying to get it to 100-year level of protection plus the 2 or 3 feet of freeboard in that area. But that is a very important clarification. But thank you for that, Dr. Uni. Any other comments or any objections to splitting this into two goals? All right. Let me just make a quick note here. All right, thank you. So we do have a just rewording of one of our strategies. This came about when we were preparing our materials for the public meeting in in Pecos and in Presidio. We had some handouts that we gave to them. Whoever showed up at the meetings that had a list of the FMEs, FMSs, and FMPs that were related to those specific areas. And we also had some examples on some poster boards, and we shared those poster boards with Jeff Bennett because some of his input was related to these FMSs that we wanted to include. And he did provide some suggestions as far as rewording these. And so we'd like to just make those part of the revised or refined FMS. So this is really just rewording this FMS, and we think it adds a little bit more detail and it's a little bit more clear. So we're proposing to make the name Development of Nature-Based Enhancements in Area Streams that Slow Floodwaters and Increase Recharge. For example, stream flow harvesting for groundwater recharge, etc. And the description would be design and install nature-based enhancements such as loose rock structures, brush weir structures, and beaver analog dams, and scale up these types of stream flow harvesting and groundwater recharge techniques where they have already been implemented. So this is sort of taking Jeff's input and sort of rewording it into as concise as we could make it for this proposed FMS. But anybody have any objections to this, or Jeff, feel free to follow up afterwards if you want to think about it and give us some edits or comments. But just wanted to present this here in case anyone else or you, Jeff, had any comments initially.
I think those look good. I might change beaver analog dams to beaver dam analogs. That's the term used in the literature.
Okay.
But otherwise, I think it gets the message across very well.
Great.
Just a thought, Chris, since you removed the Almedo Creek and Rio Grande joint venture from the description, do you think it might be useful to put it in parentheses after the end where it says where they have already been implemented? Just put parentheses, for example, Almedo Creek and Rio Grande joint venture.
Well, we're sort of limited in our descriptions that the official descriptions to 124 characters, I believe is the limit, because it all goes into a geodatabase. So since we didn't really specify the, companies that are involved in some of these and any of our other strategies, we purposely left that out. But that is, when we do a general description in the plan, we kind of write about these things, we can include some additional details like that in the overall general description.
Okay, that'd be fine.
And you could take out Rio Grande joint venture and just say local cooperating NGOs or conservation partners or something like that. Since we can't fit Dixon Water Foundation in there, which is our other partner, maybe just take out our name.
Okay, and you said local cooperating, what was it?
Conservation NGOs or something like that.
Okay. All right, thank you. And I know we've also had a discussion with Jeff Bennett and Philip Boyd about an issue north of Marfa related to historical berms or diversion dams that have been placed in arroyos, which basically divert several arroyos into a single arroyo, which then has a larger dam structure on the downstream end of that. And this was a practice that seems to have been done so that they could collect water and have a large tank location where it would be sort of in one location. But what that's end up doing is concentrating these flood waters instead of keeping them spread out into several different arroyos. It's concentrating them into one much larger arroyo, causing a lot more erosion and potentially increasing the flood risk of downstream communities such as Marfa. And we do know that they had a death in the most recent large event they had back in 2021. And so this was something that Philip and Jeff brought to our attention, and we are considering, potentially adding an FMS, but it is pending approval of some of the landowners at this time. So it's up in the air. If we can get that approval in the next week or so, then that's something that we'll consider. But at this point in time, I don't think it can be an FMP because there is a big risk when you're talking about removing these berms. We can't make things worse, and so there would need to be some sort of a study done to demonstrate that there would be no adverse impacts by removing some of these berms. As I mentioned, there's a flood benefit in the sense that you don't have all this concentrated flow in one arroyo, which could then wash out the dam downstream of that one arroyo and cause a big flood risk there. But I don't think we could recommend it as an FMP until there was a study. So it would likely be either an FME or an FMS if that gets approved. Yeah.
That makes sense. That makes sense to me, Chris. All the water eventually ends up in Alameda Creek flowing through Marfa. Whether it stays in those individual tributaries for another half mile each, and then gets concentrated, or whether it's concentrated through that through that tank. But I would comment that this is not the first time I've seen this. I mean, it's pretty common, and I don't know if there's a way to use remote sensing to sort of identify long, miles long diversions gathering water up from multiple arroyos in all the counties within the region. Maybe there's some sort of automated remote sensing technique that I'm not aware of, but the failure of these things aren't maintained. They were put in the 50s and the 60s, and they're not maintained. And when they fail big. So, that is a flood risk that I think is not limited to just Alameda Creek.
Hey, Jeff, do you think that including in the description of some of these things, your article on floodplain management that you sent out and let us read, which I thought was an excellent article. Do you think it'd be useful to reference that as a potential mechanism for solving some of these issues and get it into the system that way?
I think stream restoration that increases storage within each stream segment is a valuable flood mitigation strategy. And I think it's applicable to all the counties in the flood planning region. So how we reference that or support that, I'll leave to Chris, but I think that would be valuable. Yes, Dave.
Has Chris seen this document?
I'm pretty sure I sent it to him.
Yes.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, and that's something, you know,
I think it'd be useful if we could reference this some way and let a lot of the community that's out there see it.
Right. I think it could be applicable to a few of our strategies and studies, like this one, for example, that's on the screen, related to nature-based enhancements, anything that's sort of disconnecting floodplains, I think, or connecting, the floodplains. I think that it would be, something we could include in the larger description that's included in the plan. Maybe not in these more concise ones, but yeah, I think we can make. Jeff has provided several references related to these issues that are applicable for different areas.
It came to mind when I was watching you or listening to you talk about the dams in Sierrablanca. If the stream segments above those dams, if we can increase storage, decrease flood peaks out of those stream segments, you could lengthen the life of those projects and not have to revisit them every 50 years or whatever it is that they're. I think it's useful in throughout the region.
Right. Thank you. Yeah, and maybe that's something that can be included in the scope of these watershed assessments that would need to take place for those dams. We can consider that. Supplemental watershed plans. All right. Thanks for that.
Hey, Chris, I think
Yes.
Dr. Borer has a question. He's had it up, I think. I'm not sure.
No, I don't have. It's from the earlier. I don't know how to get it off.
Okay. So yeah, lastly,
There
we're
it
going
is.
to talk about FMPs.
Thank you.
We'll try to wrap this up in the next 15 minutes or so. But yeah, we've got about 5 or 6 slides. So this, again, we're circling back to that earmark that we prepared with coordination with Hudspeth County. We put in $50,000 for a program to establish a process that would deal with illegal developments and help them set up an ordinance and regulate development in Hudspeth County. And so we just wanted to give an update that we did come up with a cost for that, and that's what was included in the earmark. That doesn't necessarily have to be the same cost we put in the plan, but that was our judgment in after talking with Hudspeth and in El Paso County, what we thought it might take to get that up and running. I don't know if Joanna, if you had any objections to including that same cost in the plan, or if you thought that was a good number, or if it seemed low or high for what we include in the plan. Joanna's still there with Hudspeth. All right. Well, we'll follow up via email as we're continuing to refine these things. And if there are any objections, or if anyone else has objections, please let us know. But just wanted to throw that out there that we did have that cost set up. An update on our last meeting, we talked about this same hydraulically inadequate dams FME, where we looked at the 27 dams in our region that were hydraulically inadequate, and we narrowed it down, and we were proposing to potentially make 2 of those dams separate from this FME and make them an FMP. We thought we might have enough information already to suggest a final design for a particular alternative, because we had done some modeling of this in the past, And so we'd suggested Fabens Dam and Camp Rice Dam. However, you know, in our recent conversations with the Texas State Soil Water Conservation Board, you know, we realized that it would be more appropriate, since there wasn't a supplemental watershed plan yet for Camp Rice Dam, to put it in there as an FME to get that supplemental watershed plan done first, and that would be a requirement before it could be proposed as an FMP. And Fabens Dam is already being funded. Gilbert Saldana let us know from El Paso County that project already has funding, so we would not include that as an FME or an FMP. And so just wanted to follow up on that we weren't going to have FMPs for these two dams, as we were discussing, you know, we were considering in the last meeting. Ben, do you have any comments or anything related to any of our FMPs related to dams? Anything you want to comment on or questions? You know, I don't mean to put you on the spot, but if you have any, feel free to let us know, or you can always follow up, you know, via email afterwards if you like. All right. I was going to mention that we've had a conversation with City of Marfa through email, actually, and we learned about a proposal when we were coordinating with View about the early warning system. They worked very closely with High Sierra Electronics, and they mentioned that they had actually met with Marfa about one of our FMPs, which we knew, you know, was being considered through coordination with the Rio Grande COG, and they're preparing the hazard mitigation plan. So we knew that they were considering installing a flood monitoring gauge at, I think it's US 67, which is just upstream of Marfa, and it's on Alameda Creek between Marfa and the airport. And they were also considering some floodgates on low water crossings. And we found out that they had coordinated with High Sierra Electronics and obtained a proposal. And so we got that proposal, and that's going to go into this cost that we are proposing for this particular FMP that's shown here. So it looks like that cost is somewhere around $383,000. So, and they did do put together a detailed scope for 2 monitoring sites, 4 locations for automatic, for road closure crossings with flashing beacons, and 2 automatic barrier gates. So sorry, there's 4 locations with flashing beacons and 2 locations with automatic barrier gates, as well as a single rain gauge and a stream gauging station, like I mentioned, but on Alameda Creek between Marfa and the airport. So that was very helpful in getting a cost together for that particular FMP. City of El Paso Stormwater Master Plan, we do have some pending analyses. We've put together a 2D model for this NW16, which is a channel project on the west side of El Paso near Country Club Road and Doniphan. It's called the White Spur Drain, and there's a portion upstream of Doniphan that has yet to be widened, and the downstream portion of the channel has already been widened for a while now. And so the project is to widen that upstream portion. However, anytime you're dealing with a channel project, especially opening up a channel, it allows more flow downstream. And so it requires a little bit more detailed analysis to demonstrate no adverse impact. We were still in the process of doing that. We have some initial results, but we are still trying to make that conclusion. And so we might be reaching out to EP Water to discuss that particular project and whether we can include it here as we're continuing our evaluations. There's also the excavating of Fort Bliss sump, which we talked about already. And as we mentioned, that was pending getting the modeling from the MCI, who's the consultant for EP Water. So whether or not we can include that as an FMP is going to be pending on when we get those models. Of course, those models will also be just for the 100-year. We need to evaluate the 500-year. So that's going to be another part is how can we get the 500-year if they've only modeled the 100-year so far. So we're going to be thinking about how we can squeeze that one in depending on when we get those models. We also talked about the gateway ponds in El Paso, and that, whether or not we can include that one, it's pending a pump configuration decisions by EP Water. So Isela, I know you mentioned you might not be in front of your computer at the moment, but there is, I guess, a question that we had put out to you all, giving you the pros and cons of a couple different pump configurations that make a big difference in cost on what would be added to those gateway ponds. And we would need to know that information, I think, before we could include that as potential FMP. So that is still pending there. And also Dallas Pump Station, Cypress Pump Station, we have reached out to the consultant that put together cost benefit analysis and asked for some of the backup modeling that was done for that cost benefit analysis. And that is also going to be critical to including this as an FMP. So Isela, I don't know if you have any comments at this time, but feel free to follow up after this presentation if you have any thoughts on these or ways that we can accelerate getting those models, because like I said, really we're going to need everything within the next week to week and a half, and then after that we're just going to have to cut it off, at least for this first draft, to do in August on what we can consider for FMPs. Potentially we can get these in as maybe part of the amendment afterwards if we don't have the information in this amount of time, but yeah, everything's kind of a big push right now for getting all of it. Presidio.
Yeah, I'll try to go ahead. I'll try to get you that information by next week.
Thank you. I'll try to fly through this last part, but Presidio, we also were considering adding a FMP. We looked at this 2008 plan that they had, and it looked like there was really one floodplain that seemed to have the most amount of houses in it, kind of went across several neighborhoods. And there was a proposal for a flood improvement in a 2008 comprehensive drainage plan that we received when we were at the public meeting in Presidio. But in taking a closer look at that, they didn't provide the proposed conditions models, which, we could redevelop those. They weren't, they did provide some results so we could see the inputs and outputs and regenerate those with some effort, but it also only designs for the 10-year. And this type of solution, it's basically adding a culvert underneath a major road, a channel and a culvert. And as I mentioned earlier, anytime you're adding a channel or a culvert, there is a risk of, maybe you're helping out a lot of people in diverting some floodwaters, but we have to ensure that we're not making flooding worse in other parts of the city. And in just seeing as how this one is a 10-year and not the 100-year, there is some guidance for FMPs that I have underlined here, where it says to mitigate for flood events associated with the 1% annual chance 100-year flood where feasible. And where not feasible, FMS and FMPs to mitigate more frequent events may be recommended based on guidance to be provided by the executive administration of TWDB. I don't know, I know that we did not have Richard here with us today, but we had a separate, is it Tressa Olson? You're with Texas Water Development Board. I don't know, has there been any guidance released about the projects that might not have capacity for the 100-year event?
That's a good question. Not that I've heard, but definitely if you would reach out to either myself or Richard via email, and we can kind of raise this up.
Okay.
Right.
Thank you. So that one is pending right now. There's also a comprehensive plan for 2020 to 2030 that I've reached out to the consultants who did that for the city of Presidio. They have a lot of ponds proposed on the upstream side, whereas this plan had a lot of ponds on the downstream side, which is more risky than having them upstream in some ways when you're dealing with this different types of solutions. So we were trying to get a copy of the plan and figure out if it's been finalized yet. It's not clear at this point whether that's final, but that might have some other solutions to consider for Presidio. But we're hoping to get that this week, and hopefully we can go through that rather quickly, assuming that they provide the modeling associated with the plan. Other pending EP Water in El Paso County FMPs, we have EA10. This one had some recent development downstream of it, where EP Water in the Stormwater Master Plan was proposing a channelized concrete channel section. Now it looks like there's been a development, and the floodwaters go underneath that development in sort of a chute, or I guess it would be a tunnel, a large diameter box culvert tunnel system underneath this building. And when we did an analysis, we weren't really finding any benefits on that project. So, we're considering maybe combining that with an adjacent project, EA9, which was not in the exact same watershed, but downstream, the floodwaters eventually combine, and there might be some benefits if we add that one in there. But we can, again, talk with Isela separately on that subject. And there's also Canutillo 1, which was, we found out, invited to submit a full application for the flood infrastructure grant recently. And that was in our top tier of projects for El Paso County. So Gilbert, do you have any issues with removing, again, this is a reconstruction of a channel with a concrete lining. Anytime you have a channel project, like I said, you have to do a little bit more detailed evaluation to prove no adverse impact. But do you have any issues, since this might be off the table because it's already got potential funding? Do you still want to include it in the plan, or do you think that we can take this one out of that tier 1 group at this point?
Hey, Chris, yeah, I think we'll be okay to just drop it out of that top of this plan.
Okay. Thanks for that feedback.
Sure.
All right. Well, that's all the discussion I had on the refinements to the FMEs, FMSs, FMPs. This is just a snapshot of where we are with our evaluations. We talked about prioritizing certain categories of information, and we are finding some of these have a little bit lower benefit cost ratios than we were expecting, and we think we're trying not to get hung up on that and reevaluate what the project should be to maximize those benefits. At this point, we're just trying to get it in the plan so that it could possibly be prepared or recommended for grant program, which could then refine some of those project details, which maybe you could get some more benefits out of them. But right now it looks like the MON3 project from the El Paso County plan, with a cost of about 30 million, seems to have the most benefits, with 897 houses removed from the 100-year floodplain, or I'm sorry, 897 that are initially in the 100-year floodplain, and it removes 568 of those and reduces flooding in 329. We're still finalizing that BCR, but based on what we have so far, we think that 5 of these things, 5 of these projects, FMPs, we can go ahead and suggest that we recommend those for the plan. Whereas Canutillo 1, I have highlighted in orange, we're going to remove that since it might already have funding. In this EA10, I mentioned, has a BCR of 0. So we're going to follow up with EP Water and see if it makes sense to keep it in the plan with that, or maybe combine it with the adjacent basin. The rest of the FMPs that we've talked about, we're still in the process of collecting some of this initial information, and so we'll be including that in before the next meeting that we have in a comprehensive list for you all to review and decide about recommendations. But that pretty much covers what I wanted to talk about. You know, the
Hey,
rest
Chris,
is
real
just
quick, we're at the 2 hour mark, and I know we have a couple of slides left and we have an action item. Just in the interest of the RFPG, I think we're maybe another 15 minutes more, Chris, so you can stick around because we do have an action item.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know how long it's going to take to get the vote. As I mentioned, this is really to kind of give you an update on these refinements that we're making as we're making them, but we will provide a full list of, you know, the updated FMEs, FMS, and FMPs. We'll continue to refine them and provide that list before the next meeting. So this vote is really, you know, I don't think it's you know, critical, but it's just really to make sure that nobody has any objections to what we talked about today. So it could be a really quick vote, up to you all. But the rest of these slides are mainly just the information that I already went over, just condensed into a slide so that you can see all the changes that are recommended here. But it's really a vote on whether you agree that we can recommend these 5 projects here that have a yes in this last column, and whether you agree with all these updates to the FMEs, FMPs, and FMSs that we talked about.
I'm sorry, I have a hard stop right now at 11. I have another meeting, so I'm gonna have to disconnect.
Okay.
Right?
Do we still have a quorum with?
Does Paul want to take the vote right now?
Okay, yeah, we can go ahead and do that. Because they're waiting on me for that meeting.
Chris, I want to make sure you've got 10A, EA 10 on here, and on your slide prior, you had EA 10A. Are those both the same?
Yes, sorry, that's the same project.
Okay, you might want to put.
And those are the ones that.
Sorry.
Is that the one we're gonna meet on later, Chris?
Yes.
Okay.
So then entertain a motion.
For the 5.
Second.
This is for the 5 on this slide that's up now.
Okay, any further discussion? All in favor, please indicate so by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, motion passes. Thank you, Gisela.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Gisela. Bye.
And
all right.
AECOM has been doing a great job at following up with stakeholders for each individual FME, FMS, and FMP. So I feel confident that if AECOM tells us this is what we recommend, chances are it's been vetted by the primary stakeholders that it's impacting, and it's a good decision. So I trust a lot, and so I don't mind doing these votes quickly.
Thanks, Omar. Appreciate that.
I agree.
Thank you. All right. Well, yeah, I don't know if you all still have a quorum or if you feel the need to vote on, you know, whether you also agree with these FMEs, FMSs, FMP updates. But like I said, you'll have a chance to look at them all again before the next meeting, you know, sort of as one list. So, you know, I'm okay with stopping there. But if you all have any other thoughts on or would like to do any more votes or can do any more votes, you know, just let us know.
And it tells us we still have quorum. So if you need any votes, as I said, I'm confident. I've reviewed the slides you sent beforehand, and I found, at least for the projects that I'm involved in, I found nothing off.
I'd like to move that we accept all the changes that Chris presented here.
Second.
Any further discussion? Okay, all in favor, please indicate so by saying aye.
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 Anybody opposed? Okay, motion passes.
And Chris, if you find that some of these, we stepped on somebody or something by doing this like we did, please let us know so we can make a correction if it's appropriate.
We'll do. And yeah, like I said, some of these, you know, might get refined a little bit further, but you know, the ones we've talked about here today, it would mainly just be a little bit of wordsmithing, maybe to make it fit those 124 characters or something along those lines. But these are really to help us, you know, refine what we're going to cost out for as a scope for these. And yeah, we will be coordinating with stakeholders as necessary to make sure that they're on board with them. So thank you all very much. Sorry, we went a little bit over. I think we already talked about, when the next meeting is going to be. It just needs to be finalized. But I think we're targeting May 24th through May 26th. So yeah.
I have an update. Yeah. So the majority of the group voted for May 25th.
Okay.
The only thing that I would want to, if Tressa can pass this along, and I'll email Richard as well. I don't know if Reem and James would want to fly in that day, or if they would want to come in the night before. So if they were to fly in that day, then I would request that we have the meeting in the afternoon. But if they're coming in the day before, then we can keep it at 9. So I would say that our time is to be determined.
All right. Yeah, that sounds good. If we've got a date, that'll be perfect. So yeah, May 25th works for us. Any other? Sounds like that's what the group agreed on. So I'll hand it back to you, Annette, to close out the meeting, or I'm not sure if it's Omar or.
All right.
Javier.
So
Did you do doodles for July also?
Yes, I do have the July,
Did
but I
you?
don't have the,
Did
just
you?
real quick on the July, we have 6 individuals who participated. So for the rest of the group, I'll just send out a reminder to fill out the poll for those who haven't filled it out, so we can get a date set for that one. But so far, of the 6 who have participated, the 15th looks like it's the day that's most desired.
The 16th, you said? 1-6?
1-5.
1-5, okay.
awesome. Okay. Anything else to talk about?
No, sir.
Okay. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn, please.
So moved.
There it is. Second. I would depend on Jeff for that.
We'll skip a couple of steps. Any opposed? I'm just kidding. All in favor, please indicate so by saying aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? All right, thank you. Motion passes. Thank you, everyone. I appreciate your time and efforts.
Thanks, everybody. Have a
Thank
great
you.
rest of your day.
Thanks.